Hello, everyone. As Laura said here, I come from RISE. We are working with the narrow circular loops that sort of try to avoid recycling at all, to sort of build longevity products that last for a long time and try to utilize them. So we sort of use the products that are built in for a long time and with high utilization. So less products need to be produced because we see that that is sort of the most disruptive loops of especially high value products. So that is what we work with. And usually when you invest in a product that should last for a long time and should be upgradable, etc., it will be probably a lot of money in R&D, but also expensive in product costs. So it makes it a bit complicated to sell that product linear, because either it will be very expensive, or you can't compete with other ones, or you have a low margin. So that's why it's always good, often good, to put them in such a PaaS model, product as a service. So sell the function or the result instead of the physical products. Often is this a function or result you actually want as a customer, not always the product as such. But there's a big problem here, and that is that if you don't sell it, you don't get the money directly, and you have to tie capital, and you stay with the risk and all that. So this short speech now, I will try to present 13 solutions we have found together with our stakeholders, how you can solve that problem to keep the ownership of the product and how to capitalize on that. So it will get pretty fast here now, because I have like half a minute per solution. So here we go. We have like we've split them into 3 different areas: asset-based solutions, business case-based solutions, and relationship-based solution. Difficulties. So we start with the asset-based.
Du låter inte glad.
What? Did you hear that? There's a new eye.
Your iPhone talking back.
Okay, was it the iPhone? Sorry.
I don't know.
She said, you don't sound happy. Okay, never mind. Now I'm happy. Okay, first one, future adaptive design. So we say to the companies who produce a product, so you have to sort of to be attractive in the financial area, to have products that are future adaptive. That means they have to be adaptable for the future in terms of not only durability, but also for the fashion perspective and function perspective, etc. So you have to build products that works for a long time in the future. Number 2 is a leaseback solution. That sort of, this is the best way for the company actually to sell the product to the bank or to the financier and then lease it back. Then you get a cost in your books, and then you rent that product for more than that. Then you have your margin. So don't tie in a company, you just move the problem to the financier. That's the best way, but somebody else has the problem. 3, build an aftermarket. This is very important. Sort of if the financier sees that there is an aftermarket or used market for your product or your industry, it's much easier to go in and finance it, because then they see that they can sell the product, to what prices and how fast if your company go bankrupt. So that is very important. Also good that other actors can sort of take over your business. If you don't manage it correctly, somebody else maybe can. 4, contract financing. Instead of sort of have your product or your company as a collateral, you can sort of have a contract as a collateral. So if you have a bunch of contract, it's a value also in the contract, not necessarily only in the product you rent, because if you have a mass of contracts, it's a value in a future value in that. But then the banks want a long and large contract. That is good if you have a business like that. But if you have a subscription service, for example, to private persons, it may be the opposite. It's a lot of contracts, but small contracts, but that mass could also be interesting, and it got a lot of redundancy in that also, that you have a stable revenue push that you push forward. 5, lease on lease. That is also to move the problem to somewhere else. That sort of, if PaaS model is so good, why don't you use it yourself? Sort of, if you can buy a PaaS model, you can sort of move that business model further to your customers, just maybe add on margin on that. So it's a rent on rent, you can say. Everything I say now, by the way, is like I have a lot of bullet points, but it will go too fast for reading all that. So if you want this deck, you can contact me later and afterwards, and then you can get the more extensive, everything I say more or less and more, you get in wording as well. So number 6, step loans. That is like, why financing the whole idea at once? Because normally with those PaaS models or subscription solutions, you add on customer step by step, and then you only need money to tie the capital for the additional number of products. So you sort of get the money when you need it, and then you reduce the risk for the banks. And if you grow, you shouldn't be a big risk. And if you decline a bit, you can sort of deduct in the same pace to sell off products. That was as said. Now we have like business case based solutions. This is, I think, is an underestimated part of the discussion, that the risk of linear today is skyrocketing, I would say. It's just semiconductors, COVID, Ukraine, steel price, everything goes up. And I think we probably see a big demand for material, or the assets now is what is not maybe the mining soon, is the product you have to take care and secure your value chain and secure the high quality steel or whatever you have. We see more and more companies sort of tie up the products. They don't want to sell it and lose control of it. So that is also a very good thing with PaaS models, that you control your material. 8, stable revenue flows. Like if you have like a subscription solutions, you sort of know, as I said before, you know that if it start to decline a bit, you can get rid of the asset in the same amount of that you lose in customers. So you sort of can control it that way. 9 is a reduce risk with controlled growth. That is when you sell a product as a function, you sort of have a depreciation, normally quite fast in the beginning as a normal, but then if you keep the product for a long time, you can get more revenue later. And if the growth is an exponential, the old profitable products is like overruled by new unprofitable. So to take care of the pace here. 10. This is typical startup, LTV CAC ratio, if you know that, the customer acquisition cost related to the lifetime value of the customer. That is that if you can, even though you read figures, if you can show that the cost of getting a new customer is many times smaller than the lifetime value that you will get soon on that customer, then you are sort of not profitable now, but will be profitable in the future. And at last, relationship-based solutions. And this is a good thing to make the customer financing your growth, like in the crowdfunding platforms, for example, and you get very loyal customers because they own the company that they are customer to. 12, long-term partnerships and with niche actors. We see a lot of the need of getting in-depth knowledge about the core or the business details. So the financier must be more interested and more involved to understand how good this is. Otherwise, it's very easy to say no. And the last one, team up with industry-specific key partners like special insurance companies for circular economy or sharing economy, for example, or take back specialist of, you see here, Trove that work with Patagonia. That will increase, strengthen your case. So I'm done. Goes fast here. I'm sorry for that, but see it as a trailer.
First of all, I really would like to say thanks for inviting me as a keynote speaker for the conference today. I'm really happy to be presenting from tourism sector point of view. So you said my name, it's Ann-Hege Lund. I'm from Narvik, Norway, and I've actually been working with the tourism sector for more than 20 years. I started very young, working on board Hurtigruten, the Norwegian Coastal Express, moving on, working on land in the booking department, then with some global projects for the company. And I guess after some 14 years in total, I started working for the municipality with tourism development as focus area. And I've been there for 7 years, and now I just started for the regional destination management company, Visit Narvik. So what I've learned so far, and I'm still learning though, is that the municipal sector is dependent on tourism to be able to create local attractive communities. And vice versa, the tourism sector is also dependent on the municipalities to be able to develop the tourism sector. And these two things aren't necessarily opposites, but codependent and must be seen and worked with in connection with each other. When it comes to green transition, the tourism sector is no exception, of course. And I would like to claim that on the contrary, maybe our sector has been in many ways pioneers when it comes to it. For example, transforming tourism activities to nature-based sustainable activities is one. And you might say that this is thanks to investors or the companies themselves, but I would like to bring forward Innovation Norway and their tool for businesses and destination. Already in 2012, they started a pilot on sustainable destinations. Sustainable destination is a Nordic region's only national labeling scheme for travel destinations with a focus on sustainability. It is a tool for businesses and destinations that are working systematically to become more sustainable when it comes to environment, local communities, cultural heritage, and then also economy. And although the label does not indicate that a destination is 100% sustainable, it does mean that it has embarked on a long-term process, a commitment. And destinations are also evaluated every 3 years. So the tool. In Narvik, the regional destination management company is cooperating with 5 municipalities. It's Narvik and Evenes in Nordland County, and then we have Gratangen, Bardu, and Lavangen in Troms and Finnmark County, which again means that we are working cross-border. And I also know that some Swedish counties down south are also working with this Innovation Norway labeling. But this also means that all 5 municipalities have agreed and committed to working towards the same goal. And I'm telling you, that was the most important job when starting the process. Getting all the municipal councils to vote yes and commit with time and money and resources to a direction and development that they may or may not have too great knowledge in was tricky. But maybe also, this is why the process of labeling has 2 phases, number 1 being commitment from the municipalities. So the tool then, it provided us with a so-called standard for sustainable destination, where we answered out the following: 44 criteria with 104 indicators to be answered and documented. And keep in mind, 5 municipalities. All we do is based on the 10 principles for sustainable tourism, advancing several of the UN sustainable goals. We have been collecting documentation, we have distributed services, we've been doing analysis, and we've been planning activities for tourism, business, and municipal sector together with them all. We started the labeling process in 2018 here in Narvik, and it has been a long process, as you can see. And now finally in April 2022, we were labeled as a sustainable destination. But really, it has been worth the effort. We know more and more tourists are becoming environmentally focused and choose sustainability while choosing their travels. Companies are also becoming more responsible and aware as we go along. And we've had meetings focusing on how companies themselves can work more sustainable. And we actually see a 50% increase in number of eco-labeled companies here in our region during the time the process has taken place. And also the 5 municipalities have committed to becoming eco-labeled within a certain period. But maybe most importantly, for us, the process has led to closer cooperation with the municipal sector, as well as it has given us all new knowledge and understanding that we have to work together on developing the destinations. And why is that? Well, first of all, we are low on resources in most sectors here in the rural Arctic areas, so we must ensure that we utilize the resources we have in the best possible ways. The municipalities see that the tourism sector contributes to developing the local societies, creating activities that also benefits the locals. This again could lead to reducing relocation and moving from the north to the south of Norway. The tourism sector is part of the solution already. Norway will cut its emissions by at least 50% by 2030. And tourism in Norway consists of accommodation, catering, and nature-based activities, most of them already zero-emission companies due to strong investment in transition to green operations. Well, and when it comes to transport, you all know the challenges in rural areas, but the development is for sure greener. The tourism sector is dependent on municipalities investing in tourism. The process with labeling our region as a sustainable destination has opened up for a bigger understanding from the municipal side on why they should be investing. And why, you ask? Well, tourism creates new jobs and more jobs. Attractive local societies create more traffic, which again creates more attractions and activities. This again leads to increased local value creation, bringing more income to the municipalities, again creating better welfare benefits to the local inhabitants. When realized, they might even call it a spinning wheel of fortune. And the awareness that this project has raised on this topic is really great. So this is why I always keep pushing this whenever I get a chance to speak up. Close collaboration between the municipal sector, the business, and the tourist development sector. It is vital for sustainable local development, and these processes must go hand in hand. They cannot be done separately. So thank you for your attention.
As you mentioned, we have been discussing a few ideas about border crossing ideas for blue economy, and I go into that today, and I'll focus in particular on one of them. There you are. Yes. Okay. When you look at the Arctic from both Swedish, Finnish, and Norwegian point of view, you see that rural Arctic is mostly ocean. So I'm starting out with looking at the possibilities where we actually include the ocean, and of course there are crossover possibilities between over three countries. What I actually have put up as ideas are the three ideas here. One is feeding the growing aquaculture industry. You know, in Norway we have a growing aquaculture industry, but we are moving slowly into a feed problem, not enough feed. So maybe we could establish a cooperation between Finland, Sweden, and Norway, so we could produce more feed. That's one of the ideas. I'll come back to that. Another one is utilization of the genetic potential in the oceans. You know that there is a huge genetic potential for taking out pharmaceutical molecules, so to say, and ingredients. That's something we could go further with. I think in Sweden you have a big pharmaceutical industry that we don't have in Norway, for instance. Here should be a basis for cooperation, and also renewable energy for fishing vessels is one of them. But I'll stick to this first one today, feeding the growing aquaculture industry. And I took this picture out of last week's Economist magazine, where you actually see the food crisis that is coming when Russia and Ukraine have to will stop their export of wheat, and you see those countries to the right there, how very much dependent they are on this. So contribution to the food crisis is, of course, important, and is even more important these days. And the law of nature is in favor of more food production from the sea. You see here that the total bioproduction is 50-50 between land and sea. In Sweden and Finland, you're probably not very much aware of that, I would say. But in Norway, with our long coastline, we are aware of that. And for human consumption, we just take 2% of our food from the sea. And there are some what I call laws of nature that is in favor of food production in the sea. Of course, the first one is that there is enough water, and the second one is the buoyancy. You know, the fish is swimming in the water column, and the buoyancy is helping the fish to keep up. It doesn't need energy to stay on 4 feet or so on. And also temperature is an advantage. Fish has a temperature down to 4 degrees. The red picture here is from the krill from the Antarctic, which is down to 0 degrees. There's no need for energy to keep a temperature at 37 degrees. So more food production from the ocean is something we are focusing very much upon. So actually, I will propose and say that fish feed production in the Arctic is a very interesting topic that we could join forces on. So we could produce more food from the oceans. The aquaculture industry is, as I mentioned, moving into a feed problem, and the Ukrainian war, of course, when the wheat export is slowing down, there will be no more wheat for the aquaculture industry. That's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that there will be less wheat for instance, African countries. So to contribute to more sustainable food production and feed production is crucial. So the aim of such a project could be to establish a Nordic consortium and a program for increased fish feed production from Arctic bioresources. I think in Norway we are, of course, have this aquaculture industry that's moving to the north. On a relative basis, more salmon production is going on in the coast of northern Norway now than it used to do before. In Finland, you can have value-added products from agriculture and forest production. I mean, you can you probably are involved in projects already where you take the forest raw material and degrade them and produce yeast from them, and the same in Sweden. So also in the agricultural part where you can grow grass, press the grass, and then precipitate protein is another possibility. So I think together we could make a good project to increase food production from the ocean. And the background is, of course, there is a huge aquaculture production in what is called the Arctic region. It was 730,000 metric tons in 21. And this is expected to increase in the years to come because of the climate change. It's too hot to produce fish, aquaculture fish down in southern regions. And also the fact that the feed material today, 2/3 of that is coming from countries south of equator. So we have to be more self-sufficient with these materials. So I invite for such a project. And well, we have done some investigation looking at these possibilities for fish feed production, and we could elaborate more on that later. But raw materials in the Arctic for protein production, some of them are identified, but we need the upscaling projects for this. So on a Nordic basis, I think this is a Nordic complementary possibility. The Nordic countries have complementary scientific and industrial strengths that will be the basis for the project fish feed production in the Arctic. It's a benefit both for Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and at least there is a market for fish. So that will be the main driver, that there is already a demanding market for the product that will come out of this, both the fish as food resource and the feed that we are able to produce. So I suggest just this project that we elaborate further on that together with the right cooperators. This has been discussed already with Finland, with the Finnish people in Luke. We have not discussed with the Swedish groups yet, but that must be established. So that is my suggestion and my contribution when GRUDE now comes to going in another phase for prolongation here. I think this could be one of the more concrete projects that we could see be able to develop on a Nordic basis. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. And this is about the Haulus project. It's a project that got stretched a bit long, up to 6 years because of Corona in the middle, but now we are getting back on track. And it's definitely quite relevant for rural Arctic. You see, we have pretty rural and very Arctic location. So if, yeah, that. So I'll outline first, I'll talk about the project, then more in general, the hydrogen valleys that can be more relevant for you all. And then the opportunities that we have identified in Finnmark and can possibly be replicated other places. So the project started with a wind park in Raggovidda, here in the top of the last peninsula in Norway, Varanger, which was not built to its full capacity. In fact, less than a quarter of it because of bottlenecks in the power grid. And those bottlenecks were not going away anytime soon. They've improved them a bit recently, but they will never be able to extract the entire 2,000 megawatt potential that is in Varanger. That's a commercial potential, not theoretical. So they came to us, these guys from Varanger Craft, and asked us, well, can we build something with hydrogen there? Well, we did a few preliminary studies, some feasibility studies, and eventually went for a EU project. This place, Varanger, has an incredible capacity factor that almost touches 50%. Normally, when you have 30%, you're quite happy. The local consumption is very small. The maximum in winter on a cold day is 60 megawatts. In summer is less than 20. And the reason is that the local economy is based on fishing, which means most energy consumption is in the form of diesel fuel. So not much to do with electrical power other than heat up your home. So we started this project in 2018, and we have a decent budget from the EU in a total of 7.5 million euros. We installed a significantly sized electrolyzer in the harbor of Berlevåg that by significantly size, I mean 1 ton per day in a town that has less than 1,000 inhabitants. So that's definitely a lot. And we started production in June last year. Actually, there was a number of delays for this and that, but the electrolyzer has been functional for about a year now. We had installed a new power line from the Ragovida wind park, which is up in the hills, of course. It's about 10 kilometers. And the reason is we want to have the electrolyzer acting as if it was part of the wind park, not just an external utility. That has something to do with tariffs. It's a long story. I will not bore you with that. But the reason why we didn't install it physically directly in the park, because we want to have an accessible production site, which is accessible both by road and by sea. The electrolyzer was manufactured by Cummins. They changed actually name during the project. They were known as Hydrogenics. You might know this name. And now the electrolyzer bears the logo of Cummins. So what is the general lessons we can get from how to start a hydrogen valley? The most important thing to remember, you have 2 sets of people, 2 different sets. There's not much overlap. They're the producers, and they want to sell hydrogen regularly, and they do not necessarily want to make a lot of money on the first year, but at least they don't want to go broke. There's a value of that before you start making serious money. At least they don't want to go broke there. On the other hand, you have hydrogen users, and they want, before they buy any hydrogen vehicles, they want to be sure that hydrogen is coming and will be available and will stay available for the duration of their investment. They want reliable supply chain, and available maintenance. They also want to be sure that there is going to be a predictable regulated hydrogen cost, because normally you only have 1 producer in an area, and then they naturally have a monopoly. So it's always called the chicken and egg problem. I personally have a grab with that. It's not really a chicken and egg problem. It's not that kind of problem, because you don't decide whether you first have hydrogen or first have users. That part is solved. The answer is chicken. So you need to start with infrastructure. That's it. There is no way people are buying hydrogen cars or buses or trucks before there is a way to refuel them. So the question is instead how to make this infrastructure credible, viable, and last long enough for people to start trusting it and buying hydrogen trucks, vehicles, and whatever. So one way is to identify some key hydrogen consumer, one big customer ideally, that can be done the market way, or you can do it the institutional way. You can involve the authorities that from the central government guarantee all parties say, if hydrogen is not available, I will buy back your hydrogen vehicle, or if customers don't show up, I will buy back your electrolyzer. And then both parties don't have any more that risk that is blocking them, and things should start chugging along nicely. So what have we found in Finnmark? Well, we were kind of lucky. We didn't plan this, but it happened just so happened that a neighboring town from Berlevåg, Bolsfjord, which is neighboring, of course, in Finnmark scale, it's 90 kilometers away. They just opened a biogas plant. And of course, we have a lot of biofuel people here that know that biogas is a half methane, half CO2. If you throw more hydrogen into the mix, you have a methanation of the CO2, and you can then have biomethane. Biomethane is something you can sell as marine fuel, and well, the name Bolsfjord should suggest you it's a fjord with a lot of boats. It's actually a quite important town for fishing in the area. So they have a significant fishing industry, and you can sell all these fishing boats biomethane as fuel, which is definitely a lot more money than just burning biogas to produce electricity. This is a potential regular customer. Of course, this building is not going anywhere anytime soon, and they have a steady need for hydrogen. So they have very good connection, very good complementarity with Herlus. They, for example, are exactly the right size. They will need about 80 tons of hydrogen a year at the right distance. So these are our best hope to establish hydrogen supply chain in the area. Fishing boats, we mentioned those where the fishing is the main activity in the area. There are already in Norway a number of battery-driven boats. I put here the name of Caroline. There was, of course, the Angelsen, which was a bit bigger later, but now they kind of become pretty common. But they are zero emission in quotes, in the sense that they still use diesel for propulsion. And when I get to the fishing field, they operate on batteries, which is more comfortable in general. And it's nice, but it's not really reducing emission overall that much. If you run on hydrogen, however, you can't remove all emission because you can store enough energy. We already have some fishermen interested. We ran a project to investigate more in detail how these fishing boats could be built and how they could be supplied, what kind of infrastructure they would need. It's actually a report that is available if you Google that code over there. Of course, it's in Norwegian, but most of you should be able to read it. One thing I was curious, if you look at the shape of this fishing boat, it looks like it passed through a guillotine or something on its backside. And that's not by chance. That's because of the regulations in Norway. Being outside the European Union, we have our own system for quota. And this means that boats are classified according to length, which means that every boat wants to be as big as possible, to have as big as cargo hold as possible, to have as much fish as possible. Which also means that there is artificial pressure to keep the propulsion system as small as possible. This is nothing technological, this is purely bureaucratic, and is actually disadvantaging a lot zero emission solution. The grand problem of Varanger craft here is the production of ammonia. That is, they want to build a much bigger electrolyzer. We're quoting 40 or 50 times the scale of Herlus, and then use this hydrogen, this green hydrogen from wind power to produce what is called then green ammonia. And this green ammonia has already its own market as a chemical feedstock. It can be used for propulsion of ships, and it can be used to fuel communities like, for example, in Svalbard, that should drop their coal power as soon as possible. So in conclusion, Herlus is definitely a major step. It's a big step, but it's only the first step. There's going to be a lot more steps to go. There is an enormous potential for hydrogen production in Finnmark, not just in the Varanger Peninsula. And we have also identified a lot of opportunities on the demand side. I just showed a few attempts, so only 10 minutes. Also, one key takeaway from this presentation is that the introducing the hydrogen economy is no longer a technological problem, is more a problem of coordination, is more than for engineers and scientists. Now it's for economists and social scientists. It's more like soft skills in order to get this done. The technology is there and it's ready. And thank you for your attention.
So my topic in this here is now the role of municipalities in green transition, and this is a quite large topic, and I choose to speak about the general level and the kind of higher level view of this matter. So first, a few words about me. I like to emphasize my background to give these opinions. So my first larger background is in business. I graduated from the Helsinki School of Economics, and I have 15 years experiences running small companies. And then the second large area is from municipalities. I used to work 10 years in development manager in Sodankylä municipality. Sodankylä is in the middle of the Lapland. And I think there's a couple of good practices pointed out in this project from Sodankylä. And there's this municipality central kitchens efforts to increase the local food in the menu. And another one is the fisheries cooperative in Lokka area. So they are quite familiar for me. And then last year I have also participated in the local politics. I am a member of Sodankylä's council and also the member of the board. And then we made in this project tour in Lapland's municipalities in spring and late winter in this year. So from these points come my ideas here. In this tour, we use this picture. I like to talk a little about that. It's, I think it's giving good point what is the role of the municipalities in larger scale. So this picture is the carbon emissions in Finland, and here is the megatons, and in the brown bar is the emissions to the atmosphere. Green one is the how much the forest sinks or takes the carbon from the atmosphere, and this is the line is the netto emissions. And then in Finland we have this goal to be netto neutral in 2035. And if we put here the trend line, we can see what is needed, where this current trend is going. So this is should be benefit if we go like we have done, and then what is needed more. But here comes the point. In the beginning, the big steps have been taken by the national level or even international level decisions. There are, for example, reducing coal in energy production. All energy, electricity production changes. There are a lot of new wind power, sun electricity. Sun is getting more and more, and then we have in Finland a new nuclear power station. I don't know if it's very friendly, but at least it's carbon neutral. And then the transportation has changed a lot. Individual vehicles, they are consuming less and less fuel, and the electricity vehicles are coming more and more popular. So these first steps are big ones where the national policies and international businesses are making these efforts. But then when we are going future, we are needing more smaller and smaller actions, and the steps of what we are taking are coming more and more local. It's even this trend gap here. When we look, these big steps are taken here, and even in the Corona year, it's quite small, this step. So smaller and smaller are needed. And even we are trying to take this main goal cap here, it's needing even more smaller actions. And when we are coming in these local actions, what are needed, then the municipalities are getting more and more responsibility for these actions. So putting together, it's very, the first steps are so-called easy because they are so big. It's the coal, use of coal, electricity cars, power plants, central heating systems. All things are giving big reductions. But then when we are going future, the big steps have been taken. We are getting smaller and smaller and local actions. And when we come in a local level, the municipalities' role are crucial. I could say crucial, that's a quite a strong word, but when we are operating in rural areas, then there are not well-functioning markets, and this green transition is needing some power to change these things. And in rural areas, the municipalities are mostly the only available power to do that. So the municipalities have a great responsibility, and when we are looking inside the municipalities, And so this is the local politicians and officials. And then there are a couple of words which we already hear in the beginning when we heard conclusions of these projects. There are awareness of these matters. And I have to say it's very uneven. Some people know nothing about it. Some people have heard it. But on the other hand, some topics are very hot. For example, talking about wind power, talking about electricity, cars, or talking about forest use, or even is the tree renewable or not. These kind of issues, they are rising big feelings in people, and some people are very strongly pro or against these. So this awareness is very different in different people. And the same thing is in knowledge. Some people know basically nothing. What kind of technology is possible to use, what kind of systems there are, what kind of communications are needed, where, to whom to give this communication, what kind of information, and when to give these. So this is a huge lack of this communication. Many people know something, and of course there are some who know very deeply, have very deep knowledge of some specific things. But when we are talking about this green transition, it's very complicated things, and we could say there's a network of different kind of actions what are needed, and these different actions, they are interconnected. So there's a need for wide understanding, and unfortunately it's really rare. Only few people have this idea of the big picture. So what is needed? Understanding and consensus in goals. I mean, this is in the inside the municipality. And how to do that? There's a lot of need. As I said, the knowledge about the different system works, technologies, information. We need good examples, especially good examples that somebody has already done it. This is complicated and difficult matter, and it's really good to know that it is possible to do if someone has already done it. And then this is very much my own experience in our municipality and in Finland, in Lapland particularly. And we need time to dialogue inside the municipalities, inside the people in municipality, time to give the point of views, explain the arguments, and try to find out what is the good goal for the whole people in that particular area. And especially to Finnish people, it's quite hard. We used to joke that Swedish people are all the time diskutering, and I have to say we should in Finland learn to diskutera too. And then, of course, we have the strong commitment in high level in organization. This is true in every kind of organization, and I think in this green transition, it's very important because it's so wide. It's very So in every organization, it's needed, but particularly in this green movement, because it's so complicated, it's so different. There are so many different things and so much different opinions. Of course, there are some good examples in municipalities where a strong leader, mainly mainly the mayor in the municipality, if there's a strong will to do these things and force the first steps, and if the results are good, there are good examples that it's lowering the resistance in the organization for the changes, and even people are trying to find new ways to go further in this process. So basically, this is what I have. So the summary is that municipalities' role is essential. It's very important, especially in the later when the small things are needed to make the green transition. And then in municipalities, it's needing lots of knowledge. It's needing lots of time to discuss and make consensus in the goals.
First of all, I'm really glad to participate into today's event, and my keynote speech would be on towards green Arctic through international cross-border initiative, highlighting the pathway. Okay, yes. So I would like to present the collaboration process of GRUDE-project for the that was ongoing for the last 1.5 months. And yeah, sorry, just like simple adjustment here. Ongoing process for the last 1.5 months on identifying findings and the new initiatives that I was glad to facilitate this process. And I have to say it's going to be quite a challenge for me today to wrap up the big work that has been done, like with the project partners, into the 10 minutes, but I will do my best. And just additionally to what Laura said, so I represent the company IPDM that provides the consultation and training services in the international project design and management, including EU funding programs and projects all around Europe. So we all can agree that Nordic countries, they have a common challenges, common national strategies, and the common goals on green transition. So the main idea is to transfer the common actions into the cross-border cooperation projects to double the common results where the cooperation really does make a difference. And the logical question would be what to start with? And the usual answer would be to jump from idea to a project. And this is what I have observed during my professional life. And this is, I have to say, really fundamentally wrong approach. Behind any idea is a more important element, is a problem. And usually it is lost and neglected in the flow of ideas. And the problem is something that the project is intended to solve, to make a positive change. So between an idea and between the project, there is a big problem analyze process that at the end might change the whole original idea in 180 degrees. If I had only 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. This is my favorite expression, and I have a feeling that the Albert Einstein knew something about the problem analyze process. The benefit of the problem analysis is that it provides a systematic approach for identifying the problems and their root causes, to ensure that attention is focused upon the real issues and not assumptions. So this is 40% of work that should be done at the very beginning of any initiative, of any project. If to skip it at the initial phase, it's anyway, it will come later on, but it will cause more distractions and even more work later. So to start with, and this is what we've done during the GRUDE collaboration process, first of all, the ownership, division of roles and responsibilities. So to work on the problem analyze together within a team or with the potential partners is a very crucial element. develop the plan, roadmap with the timeline, and of course, steps to take. Problem analyze is an ongoing process with a constant collecting data and sharing ideas and brainstorming to get out as much information as possible. And of course, the grassroots level. So whose problem is it? Like whose pain the future project is going to solve? Any project is intended to make the positive impact and involvement the stakeholders and the potential partners who can actually implement those impacts and who are the target groups of that impact is very important. And to have that constant dialogue with the stakeholders and to hear out their voices. Otherwise, the idea, problem, or the project is full of assumptions and the guesswork and has nothing to do with reality. So, GRUDE collaboration process started with originally identified problems, including private and private sector. And I'll just name them. So there are 6 of them. Public sector cannot reach their emission goals. Public sector is not investing enough in the regional resilience, such as local food and energy production. Companies don't use circular business models. Lack of funding and leadership for circular innovation hubs in the countryside, development of sustainable green tourism practices and image, and resilient and sustainable fish feed. And these initially identified problems, they have been, in a way, crystallized from the whole project duration, like from the negotiation with the stakeholders. And during the 1.5 months, during the whole collaboration process, we even break into more specific problems. And we went through the 8th step of the specifically designed roadmap for this process that I will go through. And the first step was identification phase, problem analyze. So we began with studying the background and the context of the project theme. The following step was the stakeholder consultation. So we carried out the workshop with the core project stakeholders. The 3rd step was defining specific problems and stakeholders. And it was followed up with the following step with the preliminary strategy selection proposal. So it was developed solutions and it was developed problem groups, and we created also criteria how to prioritize those problems. And then there was a 5th steps to indicate the wider picture, and it's quite important. This is during the midterm results of the whole process to check if the project is in line with existing strategies at the European Union, national or regional level, and if it actually contributes to the goals set in the relevant strategy, because we are, in a way, targeted to find out the initiatives at the end. So we need to know in advance, are we going to find any financial instruments who are going to finance those potential initiatives? And then the 6th step was to present the preliminary results to relevant stakeholders, which is also important to collect the feedback, to collect the comments, and to see that the actual stakeholders, maybe potential partners, they're interested in those initiatives. And the final step was, not the final, but the 7th step was to establish preliminary specific objectives and the project results. And it was done by selecting the most preferable project problems after the entire identification cycle. And this is something that I'm going to present later on. And the 8th step, the dissemination of identification results and kind of findings to the wider audience. And here the event where we all are participating in. Okay, so speaking about the initiatives, so I will present 4 potential initiatives that after the whole entire analyze cycle, they've been outlined, and specific objectives and the expected results that have been developed for them. The first initiative under the initially defined problem, which is public sector cannot reach emission goals, where there are missing wise solutions, approach, models, example, methodologies in various industries. And the specific objective would be to develop green transition wise solution models. And there are 4 potential expected results here. So the research conducted in selection sectors on existing methodologies, benchmarking of good practices and existing methodologies in selected sectors, development of the wise solution model and the tested wise solution model in selecting sectors. The second initiative was outlined under the problem, which is like public sector is not investing enough in regional resilience, and where the lacking conditions for the green transitions among other weak public and private partnership. And today, my colleagues, previous speakers, keynote speakers, they've been a lot speaking about the cooperation of the private and public sector and the involvement of municipalities. So this is something that also referred to that. And the specific objective would be the green transition ecosystem model in the Nordics is developed. And potential results are public and private cooperation is improved, strategy suggestions for development and incorporating green transition in the municipalities are created, good practices of regional green transition are highlighted, and recommendations for incentive programs are created. The third initiatives, and we're already moving to the private sectors, under the problem, companies do not use circular business models, and it also connected to the problems that existing business model innovation practices are not used in the Nordic region sufficiently. And the specific objective of these potential initiatives and maybe potential cross-border cooperation projects would be circular business model integrated in the practices of companies. So the results, expected results are innovation business model training created and carried out, sustainable business model methodologies for rural regions demonstrating a new innovation business thinking and approaches developed, benchmarking, and this was also outlined a couple of times. So to have a good practices, to have a good examples for this, it means that if it's implemented, so other people can implement it as well. And the final expected results would be showcase focusing on the local raw material is introduced. And the final 4th results, Karl, almost from Sintef, he actually spoke about it already. It was the lack of resilient fish feed in fish farming, and the problem is need for more sustainable and resilient fish feed in fish farming. So the specific objective is sustainable and high quality fish feed in fishing farming is developed. And the potential result would be research to identify potential sustainable fish feed solutions, awareness raising campaign is implemented, innovation and development work conducted to introduce new types of fish feed, testing is conducted, and proposal for continuation and a larger scale project is created. And the following steps after those initiatives would be to look for the financial instruments. So either to get the financing for the preparatory actions, kind of the small scale projects, or to get for the regular projects financing. And you could see also in between of the actually applying for financing and submitting applications. So some more steps are needed in regard to the developing of the project plan, development of the work packages, designing the project schedule and the budgeting, and then after that submitting an application for financing. And also just to mention that the positive changes in green transition that countries are looking for are about cooperation and taking specific actions. Thank you very much.
As you talked about the bioresources, and you know what other, so to say, streams could we see from the agricultural areas, because there is grain that is used for, you know, feed for other animals, land-based animals. So the question was, what kind of materials can we see maybe from the agricultural and from the forestry sector that is needed in your proposal, so to say, on the fish feed?
Yes, well, we have done an investigation where we have been looking through 23 different possible feed raw materials.
23. Wow.
23. And from that study, we have come up with that there are 4 actually possibilities that we can scale up that will give quantities that's significant to what's needed in the salmon production. And those 4 are, first of all, harvesting mesopelagic fish species. That's something we are focusing upon in Norway. It's a huge resource in the ocean. The second one is to grow grass, press the grass, so you get this liquid, and then precipitate the protein out. The fiber is still there, of course, so you can give to cows. And the idea is that in some of the rural areas, at least, there are agricultural land that is not used anymore. It's just lying there. It used to be farms there before, not anymore. So there, it's a potential. And the third possibility is to grow phototrophic microalgae. Like we are now having an industrial project in northern Norway growing phototrophic algae. And the fourth one is more classical fermentation, bioprotein production by using natural gas in Norway. But I know in Finland and Sweden, you are probably deeper into utilization of wood, grass, and fibers and things like that to convert that to fermentable sugars like glucose and so on, and then produce yeast from that. So there are some possibilities here for a joint Nordic cooperation, I think. But when you ask about other side streams from agriculture and things like that, for instance, we have been looking into the possibility of using rest raw materials from slaughtering cows and things like that, chickens. But it's very low quantities compared to what we need for use in the aquaculture industry, because we have set a limitation that if we are going to scale up, put money into scaling up, well, then we should at least have a potential so we could contribute with 5% of the feed that is needed. So that should be the motive for scaling up. But of course, there are other side streams, small side streams that you should handle for environmental issues, or maybe you can even take out some high value components. For instance, in Norway we have a project where we take sludge from juvenile production plant and use it for growing sea cucumbers. Sea cucumbers will never be a protein resource for the salmon production, but sea cucumbers are paid with about €1,000 a kilogram in Southeast Asia. So there might be other markets. Okay, yeah. I don't know whether that was an answer to your question, but.
I hope that was an answer to the person that was posting it in the chat. I definitely felt that you answered it. Sea cucumbers was interesting. I didn't know, but that's always the thing, right? There's many more markets and many more applications that are showing up also in changed conditions that are becoming more and more relevant. And I think on one of the other recent events, we also had somebody talking about seaweed and how to make food and chips out of seaweed, vegan and very easy to produce more or less. But it's just a new source that we need to kind of market in the right way.
Yes.
And does anybody else in the panel want to add to this question, or should we jump to the next question from the chat?
Well, maybe I can add a small comment since you're mentioning seaweed production. Seaweed is, of course, the largest aquaculture species globally. It's more than 30 million metric tons produced in Asia. And the fact is that at least half of that is for human consumption. So it's right, as you're saying, we should maybe see whether we can get some products for human consumption out of that. But to use that as feed ingredient, it's not very economic because it's 95% water and the rest is carbohydrates, very limited lipid and protein content. So your calculation will end up with red numbers. Yes.
Yeah. So that's we need to find different ways to utilize it.
Yeah, but it definitely has to be a market. Whatever we are doing, we should find a strong market, and the salmon market is increasing.
Yeah. All right, great. And if we talk about markets, there was actually another question here, and that was for Peter. I already started it. It's somebody that wrote that it's often stated that one issue with the rural areas is that there are low market density, which is leading to increased demands for infrastructure to cover the vast geographic areas of these low density markets. And if you can reflect a little bit about that, how does this affect the viability of these PaaS business models, and are they kind of doable for the rural areas, or do you have any great examples for that? That would be lovely to hear more about.
Yeah, they could definitely be. Of course, a high density city has more potential in some of these models, but either if you have like a small village, you can always sort of everybody has to have their own product, say a chainsaw or a bike maybe you want to have, constantly access to that product, because you don't never know where you need it. But a lot of products we have that are not used so much. We used to say that the car is used, is unused 95% of the time. I think everything we have is like unused 98% of the time, most of them at least. So you can always sort of share it, but you can also share it over time, I think. If you have a longevity product and which is upgradable and refurbished in almost in eternity, you can sort of have one owner have the product and then the next owner have it. So when you should buy a chainsaw, for example, why if you buy it as a function or as in a take back program, you sort of the OEM can sort of guarantee the function, etc. So you buy what the product does, not the product as such. So I can have a good example from Northern actually. We have worked with Umesläp lately. That is a, what do you call that in English? Horse trail. You sort of transport horses, and they have a extremely high quality product since years, and they have got new competition from low quality competitors, and the buyers not really understand this in the buying window. So they sort of swapped now and looked at selling the high quality trail as a service or in a take back program. And all of a sudden, since that value is so high over time due to the quality, that is actually cheaper than per month than the low quality option. And plus that you have an environmental impact on it, that they will not go back to the mining and do it all over again with new products. They sort of invest in longevity in their product. They see the trails as assets that they own. So And that is a one-to-one product. You have your horse and your trail, and when you're done with that, somebody else has it, but it never ends up on a junkyard. So it definitely can be applicable in rural areas, these kind of models.
Yes, thank you. That was a great example. That's also right around the corner from where I live, basically. And yeah, I totally agree. That is interesting. And as Kina wrote there, it's kind of a fun fact or a sad fact that the drill is only used for 12 minutes during its lifetime. And I think what you see as a difference, though, now that I moved from like the big city of Berlin, where I grew up, to like the countryside of outside of Umeå, northern Sweden, that people share things a lot. And you don't even need the business model, maybe. You just have access to like five neighbors' garages. But I guess the problem is that people are not really used to asking anymore, and that there's, you know, the whole norm of that you want to own your things, and there's not so much sharing. Do you have any other examples where that could be utilized, or where like a rural solution for example, a tool library or so would be viable, so that not everybody buys their chains or whatever they need?
Also, it depends on product. If you need a product maybe a couple of times per week, maybe and you live far away from the next house, so then not very practical. But I think a lot of tools you have quite seldom, and you can definitely drive a bit to get it. I'm sort of part of Hyglo, if you know that platform in Sweden, like a eBay, but you rent stuff between people instead of selling it. And I have like 27 rents now in 2 years, and I rent a lot out, and I rent myself a lot instead of buying. It's perfect. I don't need space for it. I save a lot of money, the insurance covering everything, and it's easier to go and get it instead of go and buy it and store it. And
and that's probably the key point, that it must be easier than the buying option. Yeah. Great, thank you, Peter. I think Jukka wants to add something. At least he's raising his hand, so welcome.
Yes, thank you. I want to comment about these markets in rural areas. There is a dichotomy in markets. So we have these big industrial or international markets. For example, Norway have these oil and gas and salmon, and then in Sweden and Finland we have forestry and mining, and we have tourism. And these are these so-called traditional industrial markets. But then we have these domestic markets and in the aerial markets. For example, for food, energy, maybe for the construction materials. So these are needing different kind of works in local level. So we can't forget these local markets. It's not big, but it's possible to get quite much money in the local economies. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jukka. And I think we can just jump around the questions a little bit, and then, or maybe, I don't know, Peter, maybe you see also that there are more questions in the chat. Maybe you want to answer them in the chat. And if there's anything more you think about, you can just jump in again and share. Yes. And so I just wanted to go back to Federico as well, who was talking about the hydrogen and also the combination with the biogas in kind of the next place that was close by. And I was wondering, because you said that there was a goal of zero emission for the fishing boats and all of that. And if they use biomethane, I wonder what are the emissions actually, and how does that work with like reducing the emissions overall?
Yeah, there are obviously advantages that they would need a much smaller modification of the vessel. They can use the same combustion engine, probably need a bit larger tank, same as conversion to liquid natural gas. It's chemically the exact same thing. And from a climate emission point of view, it will be zero emission. You would still have carbon monoxide and NOx, but that's not your main concern when you're in the middle of the Norwegian Sea. It is, however, going to be likely a bit more expensive than normal diesel, which in turn is going to be more expensive using hydrogen or electricity.
So you think even with the prices going up in the future, don't you think that the prices will level in quite recent future? Or
I think I'm wise enough not to make any predictions in that sense, that no one can at this point. Right. But that generally biofuels have a scarcity problems. You cannot make that much of them that you can run an entire, where they're available, they should be used, but you cannot run every car on biofuel and every truck and every train and everything.
Yeah. But I mean, the good thing, as you said, is that you can use the existing boats that are there, so you don't need to actually build a whole new fleet of new boats that work with a new fuel, but you can actually refurbish them, so to say, to
yeah. You could also refurbish them to use hydrogen or batteries, because most of these vessels already have an electric driveline where diesel generator produce electricity, which then is delivered to the propeller. So it's just a question of changing the generator.
Yeah, great. That's lovely to hear. And there were a few other questions that you've already answered in the chat as well. Is there anything more you wanted to add on those?
Yeah, well, the safety, a lot of people worry about safety, and safety is quite well understood. Obviously, since the days of the Hindenburg, everybody imagined this enormous ball of fire. And well, yeah, that's so scary, but you also have to remember that more than 2/3 of those people were on board of the Hindenburg walked out of there on their legs, but maybe not all on their legs, but survived. And that's a lot more than equivalent plane with that many flames coming out. And the reason was that hydrogen has some inherent safety properties, like when it burns or when it leaks, it goes to the sky and not down on people. It also behaves differently from gasoline or diesel, and I'm not saying it's absolutely safe. You can still, it's an energy carrier. There's always a chance the energy is going to go to the wrong place, no matter the carrier. But it is definitely overall safer than gasoline. We just have gas distributors, or just in cities where children can go and just put some coins in and get a highly flammable liquid that they can start to fire. And we don't think twice about it, but there's no way that if gasoline was invented today, it would be allowed to be distributed the way it is.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with that reasoning as well. So great. I think that's of course also a question regarding all the climate emissions and these things. So thank you, Federico. And I think we can jump back a little bit to Jukka there, because there was a question. If you have checked the GRUDE area and the municipalities that are in this area, do you think that they've already taken all those easy steps to get rid of the carbon emissions that you mentioned? And do you think that we have enough knowledge of suitable solutions for the rural public sector, where market-driven solutions do not oftentimes work because, for example, the PaaS models need a certain critical mass? Is there any examples for public sector solutions?
When I was talking about these big steps, they are not in the hands of municipalities. They are at the national level or even border. We don't have enough knowledge. It's quite clear. The biggest things in small municipalities, there are maybe these district heating plants, and even there are some problems. People usually know the burning, but hardly anything else. And the intelligent systems in housing energy, well, some companies are consulting, but general knowledge is quite poor. So very much it's needed. And if you're talking about small communities and municipalities, the biggest sources of let's say these carbon dioxide are traffic and energy in housing, and these are quite small things and needing very much communication. And these kind of things are needed. The bigger ones, bigger cities have these opportunities, and I haven't seen in Finland's Lapland much very advanced solutions. Of course, wind power is quite large, but that's not a municipality things. So not much in my knowledge.
All right, thank you for that. And you can also see there are some questions for you in the chat on any empowering tips that you have for listeners to convince the municipalities that are not already on board with the scarce resources to work with this development. That would be very great, I think, if you think about it a little bit and maybe come back to that question. And I just wanted to say that I've been recently traveling a lot with a train through southern Germany, and it was such a different sight to see, because on almost every roof you see solar panels and you see the wind farms and you see cows grazing under the solar panels and all of that. So, I mean, given the fact that we here up in Umeå, at least, we have the same amount of sun hours as northern Germany, it's definitely also a resource that we need to kind of get out to the people. And I know that there are some models out there for renting as well that can make it easier. But I wanted to go also back to Ann-Hege, because we had some questions there regarding the municipalities and the collaboration on these kinds of things that you mentioned as well. And it's kind of the question, how does the cooperation work? How do you get it going between all those different actors that you've mentioned as well? And how do you sort of say not just leave it with the tourism, but go to say the sustainability of the whole region or the whole municipality? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, try at least. I'm not sure what is meant by actors, if it is the suppliers that deliver the activities in the region, or if the actors in this case are the different municipalities.
Yeah, I think there was also, you had a slide where you mentioned like the municipalities and the private sector, and then a third part, I think, like these types of different organizations and actors and sectors. How do we get them to collaborate?
Well, yes, it has been challenging, of course, and there has been jealousy. But this again also is a process, and the green transition has been a process. Because when we start to talk about it several years back, it doesn't affect them. No, that is something that other people is doing. Green shift, no. Sustainability, I don't care. But moving forward, the awareness has been kind of risen, and we communicate with what we think is the most important UN sustainable goal at all, number 17, cooperation to achieve the goals. So by doing so, we also try to show that cooperation could lead to innovation, could lead to reduced cost by sharing. So in time, I think that they understand by both cooperating or that new actors come in to establish their companies, they see that it brings more value to them in the end. So again, with the process. And I think it was a question on how we can ensure that everybody is actually sustainable. Well, we cannot ensure that, and we are not authorities that can decide that you have to and you cannot do this and that. But we can influence. We can be influencers. So that is all we can do, and try to slowly transform into more sustainability wherever we are. And as the regional destination management company, we have a responsibility to do so. So yeah, I hope that answers those two questions. I also would like to take the chance just to add up to the comments related to the markets, and Kina had the questions on the future path of rural Arctic. And I was thinking a little bit about, we have Teco 2030, a company that just has established here in Narvik, and they are producing fuel hydrogen fuel cells. So how could this benefit the tourism industry? We are looking into projects such as using these fuel cells to heat up pools, because the pools normally are very cold, or it costs a lot of money to heat them or something like that. So and also we are talking within agriculture, aquaculture industry, about how can we use the tourism industry to come and visit your facilities, to bring more value to your industry and so on. So my point is that we kind of try to also cooperate cross-sector, you know. So thank
exactly.
you.
That was a great point, cross-sector, because sometimes you, with the symbiosis mindset that was mentioned as well, you need to kind of think cross-sector, and that's something that people aren't really used to. So as you say, that tourism could be a great way to open up people's mind and see like different possibilities, and also to activate the local maybe food delivery and production in new ways that could happen. And also
even the seaweed that Karl was talking about. I mean, tourists would be interested in seaweed for sure.
Yeah. Go diving in the seaweed production. I think I've seen that recently, that somebody did that actually outside of Swedish coast. Great, thank you, Ann-Hege. And maybe Karl, you have your hand up. You wanted to.
Yes, I have a question for Jukka, because when you presented your diagram with a reduction in the carbon emission, it was very impressive. This diagram, what you have achieved since 2005 down to 2020, it's a great percentage, I think, in reduction. But I wonder, then you have the carbon absorption by the forests, and there was a tremendous increase from 2019 to 2020. It nearly doubled. I just ask what happened.
Sorry, I have to check the pictures. Just a second.
Yes, because that was
that's good question. Good question. And I was almost changed this picture, because we have a fresh calculation that the forests are taking much less carbon in atmosphere nowadays. So in Finland there might be a huge problem because of the not changing the calculation methods, but also because there are so much cutting in the woods. So I'm not sure this is come from the ministry, this calculation, and I'm not sure where this jump came from. Sorry.
No, because if this was some kind of reality, it would be very interesting to learn from you. How can we achieve that? But if it's a different way of calculation, or I was thinking about this some kind of COVID effect, that you didn't harvest so much from the forests for a year or two. But well, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. I think I would just like to also ask a question to Renata, and then we can continue, because there's like follow-up questions everywhere going around. Renata, there was a question for you in the chat about what problem analysis tools or approaches you were using in your work, and how you see in practice the continuation of those ideas that you presented and how they could be developed. And I mean, there were some quite interesting ideas that we've been discussing here as well, also like both business side and the agricultural and fishing industry. So it would be interesting to hear more.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for those questions. And the project cycle management approach was used as well, the result-oriented approach. So this is like two approaches that they're accepted by the Commission, and they're widely used in the development project and also in the implementation project. So it's very handy to use it like at the initial stage. And then if the initiative will be moved forward towards the cross-border cooperation project, so it would be in a way easy work like during the application phase. And also how we could move forward, or how the partners could move forward with the initiatives. So of course, I've partially described it during my presentation, but to continue work on the formulation phase, which include the continuation on the developing the partnership, developing the main metrics of the future projects, which are like project plan, project schedule, budgeting, and of course, looking for the right financial instruments, because there are a lot of potential there. There are a lot of financing there. And as far as I know, by 2050, the Commission is intended to make the European Union as like one of the largest neutral ecological bloc there, and it means that there will be massive investment there. So if I'm not mistaken, like 1 trillion euros there, like through the public investments and through the European financial instrument investment. So it means that there will be possibilities and there will be financing there for the cross-border cooperation projects. And everything what today was discussed, of course, it could be turned into the project as well. Okay, I hope I answered the question.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to point out that in case anyone in the audience is raising their hands, I don't see it. So just put on your mic or write in the chat, then we can see if there's follow-up questions also to the things that Renata just said, which sounded great. And I think that this will also be very interesting to see the follow-up of the GRUDE-project, because I know from experience in Denmark, for example, there have been projects starting with circular business models, and then they went into one side of the sector, let's say the building sector, and they continued with projects and projects and projects, and they've just kind of spread out to a lot of businesses in the region that have gone and went from the awareness level to actually like learning, gaining knowledge and understanding, and then doing concrete actions and changing their business models together with the help of the regional councils as well and the municipalities. So there's definitely things to learn, and there's definitely more that we can do here. And so there was a question, I think, also to the municipal representatives, or maybe others that have more examples of what is maybe most interesting when making move towards the circular economy and resource efficiency. Is there maybe any of you in the panel that has more examples from the rural Arctic or any other rural area there that have been other examples implemented? Or maybe like to go back also to the opening question of where do you see those bottlenecks, and where do you see that one has gone over the bottlenecks and got the right way to do? I know that Ann also answered the question a little bit, but maybe one of you others would like to answer that more.
There was a question on our best and most empowering tips to the listeners to convince. And I would like to try to answer that one out, because I think you have to just dare to invest for future value creation, not thinking about it as a lottery that you might lose or win, but thinking that if you don't invest, you cannot grow. And I know that there has been studies that says something about the municipalities that dare to invest in development have larger success rate in succeeding. So, and managing it. So it's about, you just have to do it, even though.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Laura, from Finland, the example of we have a plan like that with our project Aptas Green Hub, like working starting with food production, circular food production. This scientist from the Luleå Tekniska Universitet, she had to leave early, but she has a part with fishing, circular production, and we also have this part where we like to communicate with people around these things, and also implement special ways to do circular economy, both with ordinary people and small and middle-sized companies. I don't know if I was invited last time to come here, and I want to know if there will be any discussion about planned projects today.
Great, thank you, Nina. I think maybe somebody of the GRUDE project could answer that questions on the continuation, and we will probably go into that also in the last part of the day. But maybe Kine or Amanda or anyone else would like to answer that. Or maybe you answered in the chat. We can say it like that. There was also another mention in the chat here because we have some audience members that are representing municipalities. For example, Boden, Utsjok, and Kolari. And the question here was, what knowledge shared here and during this GRUDE project is most usable and interesting when making moves toward the circular economy and resource efficiency? So if you would like to say something, just raise your hand, or if you would like to answer the question in the chat, I think that would be very valuable also for others to read. And I see that Jukka is having his hand up, so I'm giving the word to you.
Thank you. I like to come back to the question how to convince the municipalities. I think the problem, so-called problem in this sector is that the area is huge and there's very little people living. So these people don't feel there are some environmental problems. That's the big, no, well, it's not problem, but it's problem when we are talking about transition. And I have noticed that this war in Europe, in Ukraine, it has raised the security problem, and I think it's giving a bit more feeling of the personal level for the people. So I think the ideas are a little bit more open to the food, energy, fertilizers, because there are much news about the food crisis, what is going to come. And people are feeling it's concerning more of them. So maybe these local food, local energy projects are more, that people are more open for these nowadays after this war crisis. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. Probably that was in a way something that opened people's understanding for the whole issue and for the resilience issue, and also for how we can then again connect all of this to the climate change issues and all the crises that we are facing together, have kind of common solutions in a way. And I just wanted to know if there was any of the other ones in the panel that would like to answer the open question that we had from the beginning on the bottlenecks and the pathways that we should go.
I could add.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, about the bottlenecks, but of course I will speak from the EU projects or cross-border cooperation. And I think I would support what Jukka said about the key challenges, the awareness, knowledge, and understanding. And this is kind of quite vivid in the project world, that there is a very lack knowledge on the understanding how to initiate the project, how to implement the projects. And I think this is like something that should be improved, and definitely raise awareness about the availability of the financial instruments there, because as I said, there are potential there. There is a lot of even on the national level there, at quite few organizations that knows about it. So definitely continue with that, and also to support what Ann-Hege said about the making kind of the influence there, because of course the international projects, they can't change everything, they can't solve like the global problems there, but they can make the influence. And I like the impression that the expression that the the drop makes the ocean. So the more international project we will have, the more influence there will be, and the more smoother the green transition is going to be.
Okay, so you believe in the project form to influence people's thinking and norms, and also
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I've been observing it during the 10 years working in the one of the EU financial authority, which provided grants for international projects. And yeah, absolutely, as I said at the beginning, the cross-border cooperation makes a difference. So I encourage stakeholders to cooperate.
Great. Awesome. So I think that there will also be continuous discussions, and people will get a summary from your work in the GRUDE project as well.
Yeah.
Great. Then I would like to give the word to Federico, maybe, as you have talked about, of course, the solutions with hydrogen, but is there any other examples of positive signs that you see are already visible, where you see that there's the most promising possibilities to go next, both for hydrogen and maybe other areas?
Well, my perspective is necessarily mostly on hydrogen, but in general, we see that there are a lot of areas that have enormous energy resources have not been exploited because of the lack of connection to the grid. In the case of Varanger, there is a grid that was made for a population of a few thousand, and it turns out they do have the capability of building wind power and making money on that. I mean, the little village of Verlevåg managed to have a swimming pool, and they managed to build things in order to slow down the emigration phenomenon has been a plague for northern Norway for generations. And these resources now can be exploited because hydrogen can work as an energy carrier, either directly as hydrogen or as ammonia. And there are a lot of communities that could also exploit hydrogen in order to, for example, make it cheaper to deliver energy. So a lot of people here know that a liter of diesel on a remote island costs a lot more than at the gas station. And if you land a diesel generator, then they're also noisy, they stink, they're unreliable. And using hydrogen, also generation and fuel cells is an alternative that can also be cheaper, in fact, because of the cost of imported diesel, and more reliable than using generators. So all these can make it a much better proposition to live in these isolated areas. And of course, well, COVID helped because now people realize that they can do a lot with an internet connection.
Yes, great. And also, as you said, as an intermediate, hydrogen can really kind of go over the gaps that we have in the infrastructure today that are posing problems, especially for the rural area. Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Federico. And I wonder, Karl, do you also want to add maybe a few last words, and then Peter as the last one, I think, to the panel discussion?
Yes, maybe. I think when this program now is coming to an end, I think we should take the opportunity to start some projects where we actually have complementary knowledge in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, where we can define a global market, where we take responsibility, for instance, for increasing the food production. I think the people suffering in Africa, we can pay more for this wheat than the people in Africa and give it to the fish. But of course we cannot do that. But maybe the Americans with their 350 billion pet food market will do that instead of us. But I should like to see some joint Nordic project taking off. And I think then the next step is to find the industrial partners there, and I think that is quite easy to come up with some industrial interest. So we will proceed from there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. And then the symbiosis thought on the whole thing to put like the right resource at the right place and the right time is of course very relevant, and not wasting just because you can waste wheat, for example. But as you said, taking global responsibility is definitely a great opportunity that the Nordics should continue.
Yes, and I'm much more interested in the raw material and the technology and the market than finding the right theoretical model. So how do we operate this?
Yeah, so that we can get going and work concrete. Thank you, Karl, as well. And I would like to give the last word to Peter, who has also been writing in the chat about some interesting things that have happened a few years ago. Maybe you can just repeat that here.
Yeah, I step outside of my little product as a service box now, but I think that was an extremely cool thing that I think it was Accenture did, that I read what I just wrote in the chat here, that I think they asked 200 mega cities all over the world to list top 5 of the best sustainability product they have done. Could be food, mobility, whatever. That should be like easy to implement, great impact, and very concrete instructions to if one of those 200 cities did something extraordinary good, they should just write down the instructions to all the other 199. So that I think that's a super way of working. That why should all people all over the place think, invent the wheel all over the place? So but that was mega cities, and it's typical that is such projects is done for mega cities. But why not addressing the rural challenges? Maybe also cut it into cold area, which also have some similarities. Maybe you and I don't know, northern Canada or whatever. So sort of to take all that, I don't know, just a thought to sort of do a similar project, just to get the 3 top ideas from everyone. It could be nice.
Yeah. That definitely sounds like a really good idea. But do you have any other, so to say, visible pathways that you see are taking off, especially for the rural Arctic, maybe?
Yeah, unfortunately not. I'm from Gothenburg, you know.
Yeah. But things are happening in Gothenburg, we could say, so maybe that will spread.
Yeah.